Hey guys! Tonight we plunge into the mud-splattered, torch-lit lanes of a medieval village, where you as a wide-eyed young bride about to endure the most nerve-jangling night of your life. Your wedding night. Picture yourself squeezed into a tiny, straw-thatched hut, the air heavy with damp wool, and the acrid glow of tallow candles. Outside, the villagers buzz like drunken bees, and you just know every whispered gossip is about you. Your stomach flips as you tug at that scratchy linen shift your finest dress, complete with elbow patches. This isn't the Pinterest-perfect, happily ever after wedding of your dreams. No, you probably won't survive this without at least one mortifying disaster that'll haunt your nightmares for years. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your location and local time. I can't wait to see where you're drifting off from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Now, as dawn's first light filters through the cracks, you wake to the crowing roosters of the village morning. Your heart races, though your eyes still feel heavy with sleep. You sit up on the creaky straw mattress, the dim glow of a tallow candle dancing across the low, thatched walls. The damp smell of wool and smoky candle soot hangs in the air, reminding you that tonight you'll face the most challenging trial of your life, your wedding night. You pull on your simple linen gown patched at the elbows, just like countless brides before you, and let out a weary sigh. If only you could drift back to slumber for a few more hours. Outside, the 200-strong village is already buzzing. Whispers swirl like spring blossoms in the breeze. Will she trip on her way to the church? Is he really trustworthy? Each passing comment pricks your heart with its sharp reminder that your fate rests on this union. You smooth your dress one last time. Some 13th century brides in England's royal courts also wore patched gowns out of necessity and echo that gives you a strange, bittersweet sense of solidarity. Historians still debate whether poor and rich alike endured these patched garments, but here you are, feeling every stitch. Your mother enters, brisk and worried. "Come on, or we'll miss the church bell," she hisses, pressing a dried sprig of rosemary into your handafolk charm said to ward off misfortune. In certain Spanish villages, brides carried small bundles of herbs like this one. Scholars disagree on how widespread the custom was, but you hold on to it anyway, a tiny island of comfort amid the storm. You step to the well and peer at your reflection in its cloudy water. The swollen anxiety in your stomach tightens. Your cheeks are flushed from hauling buckets of water all morning. A local tale warns, if a bride's face looks paler than usual in the well, she's cursed with a difficult marriage. You force a smile, though the chill in your bones has nothing to do with prophecy. Your father waits by the courtyard gate, horse-bridled and ready. Your two younger siblings stand behind him, barely concealing their excitement. Unlike you, they have years before their own betrothal. You slide into your father's waiting hand, heart pounding with a mix of dread and determination. A gentle jibe crosses your mind. If only this wedding had air conditioning. As you follow your father down the muddy path toward the church, every pebble underfoot feels like a test. Villagers line the route, their eyes tracking your every move. You recall the superstition. A stumble at the church threshold spells lifelong bad luck. Scholars debate whether this belief was village, specific, or spread throughout medieval Europe, but you don't dare chance it. You suppress a shiver as the massive oak doors of the church swing open. The warm flicker of candlelight reveals stone walls thick with incense haze. You inhale, steeling yourself for the solemn vows ahead. Behind you, the murmurs of the crowd fade to a distant hum. Tonight, you'll step into a sacred contract, one that binds your family's future to another sand, possibly binds your own heart more tightly than you ever imagined. So you draw in a slow breath, square your shoulders, and step forward ready to meet whatever awaits on the other side. As the heavy church doors close behind you, the damp morning air seems to press in all around. The guttering tallow candle still casts trembling shadows over the worn thatch walls. Rows of plain wooden benches stand empty now, their dust-coated surfaces making the flickering light feel even more melancholy. The narrow Islea path walked by countless brides before you echoes with a hollow ring underfoot. Tomorrow is the wedding, and the entire village buzzes like a broken beehive. Bent over the side of the well, bucket in hand, You catch snippets of gossip drifting on the breeze. She's lucky to marry the miller's son, but he's known for his temper and wandering eye. You clamp your jaw, trying to ignore it, yet every harsh word clings to your patched linen gown like wet hay. This ceremony isn't yours alone. Tonight's nuptial bed is the village's public spectacle, and you, unwilling star, must play your part. Marriage here binds two families, exchanging land and labor in equal measure. Love is a fleeting illusion. A local legend warns that any bride who trips on her way to the church is cursed with misfortune. Whether that superstition was widespread or merely a village rumor remains in debate among historians. But you won't risk tempting fate. The well's wooden bucket feels heavier than yesterday, and when you catch your reflection in the murky water eyelids heavy, cheeks flushed by dawn's chores, you wonder how many more mornings you'll endure like this. Inside, the cottage is steeped in the scent of boiled cabbage and damp wool. Against the rough-hewn walls, a cracked bronze mirror hangs crookedly, its surface flecked with age. Each crack seems to trace out the worn lines on your face, a visual echo of your exhaustion. On a rickety shelf, your mother has placed a vase of dried borage, one of those odd folk charms meant to ward off the bride's curse. In some corner of 14th century Europe, newlyweds tucked similar sprigs under their pillows. Scholars still argue over how common that custom was, but to you it offers a tiny island of comfort in a sea of dread. You drift past a low wooden stool, fingers trailing the carved grooves where countless feet have rested, and catch sight of your father's boots, polished but unmistakably heavy. Your little sister sits on a straw pallet, wide-eyed and oblivious to the storm brewing in your chest. In this village, privacy is a stranger. Every moment of your life is fodder for gossip around the hearth and at the market stall alike. Outside, the morning sky is a pale wash, the thatched roofs dripping dew onto the packed earth. The children's laughter tumbles down the lane, but it sounds more like taunts than joy to your ears. The miller's son your intended lingers near the cartyard, face smudged with flour. You pause, wondering, is he as trapped by his future as you are by yours? The church has declared marriage a sacrament, a sacred contract under God's watchful eye. Yet consent here feels less a choice and more a formality. Scholars still debate the real power medieval women held in matrimony. Whatever their conclusions, you know that for you, every vow spoken tomorrow will be written in someone else's hand. Your mother's voice calls you back inside, a brisk reminder to undress for your washing before the wedding. The coarse cloth scrapes as she pulls at your hair, a frantic ritual to make you appear presentable to prying eyes. You clutch the edge of your patched shift, stifling a sigh as icy water sloshes around your ankles. Some villages believed washing a bride's feet brought fertility, another quaint custom, whose true reach historians continue to dispute, but your teeth chatter more from the cold than any prospect of luck. Gowned now in a faded blue hand-me-down, wool heavy and stiff against your skin, you stand on the threshold of your future. A crown of wildflowers sits lopsided atop your head, petals already wilting in the chill. Each coil of your hair has been combed into place, yet stray strands float around your face like cobwebs. You lift a trembling hand to steady the crown, half smiling at a joke you barely feel. If saints had to wear this every day, they'd have revolted long ago. Below, villagers gather at the edge of the field, voices rising as the wedding feast descends into chaos. Tables groan under the weight of roasted turnips, barley stew, and a pig whose toughness rivals your own resolve. Water-diluted ale slops from tankards, sticky underfoot. Some believe that spilling ale brings good luck. Others say it's just an excuse for another drink. You clench your wooden cup, the ale's bitterness doing little to quell your nerves. A group of young men near the bonfire call out, "You'll need strength for tonight's duties." Their laughter cuts sharper than any blade. You swallow the hard bread they thrust at you, cheeks burning at the thought of what they're truly betting on the consummation that seals the deal. A friend once joked, "If this feast is wild, the wedding night might be a riot." You force a small laugh, but inside your heart pounds a solemn warning. As the sun dips toward the horizon, shadows stretch across the dirt path leading to the miller's house. The sky's crimson glow only heightens the sense of things closing in. Your father's low growl about dowry and mishandled negotiations echoes in your mind. If they bicker over barley now, what will they demand from you tomorrow? You follow your mother's lead, each step heavier than the last. You pause at the church threshold for one final breath. The stone lintel feels cold against your skin, the air inside thick with incense and expectation. Behind you, the village crowd falls silent, anticipation razor-sharp. Ahead, the sanctuary's dim light beckons an altar of vows and a cage of duties. And so you straighten your shoulders, tuck your trembling hands beneath your gown, and step forward into the next chapter of a life you never truly chose. Your heart aching, your spirit weary, yet somehow still finding the strength to carry on. The moment you step inside your little thatch-roofed home, the pungent aroma of boiled cabbage mingles with the damp wool, wrapping around you like a moldy blanket you can't shake off. On the worn wooden table, your mother is carefully arranging your wedding trousseau, a handful of freshly plucked hens, a bolt of coarse undyed cloth, and a stout wooden stool your father carved himself. This isn't a lavish, noble affair with gold and night-sits, a straightforward transaction to bind two families, trading land and labor so the village network stays intact. You settle onto the edge of your straw pallet, hands trembling as you stitch a loose seam in your linen shift. Your heart tightens at the thought of tomorrow's ceremony. Your father stands in the corner, anxiety etched deep into his features as he glances over the modest gifts laid out. "Make sure you handle yourself with grace," he grumbles. He even mentions that in 12th century England, peasant weddings were often just a few hens and a crust of bread, yet the vows spoken at the church altar carried the real weight. The church had long ago declared marriage a sacramenta binding. Holy contractant historians still debate how much real agency medieval women actually possessed. Your mother's voice drifts on, listing every last detail. How to braid your hair so no stray lock falls across your face, exactly where to stand when you greet guests, and the proper way to smile so no one thinks you're unhappy. You stifle a yawn your boredom, nearly eclipsing your nerves. You remember reading a curious note about some Normandy villages in the 14th century, where brides carried a tiny broom to ward off evil spirits entering the nuptial chamber. No one's mentioned a broom today, but you wouldn't put it past your neighbors to slip one in. Casting a glance out the narrow window, you see your father scattering grain for the hens, his back bowed in both fatigue and pride. Your mind drifts to how life used to be when you were a child running freely through the fields, untouched by family negotiations. Now, even these simple gift shens and cloth feel like shackles. You draw in a steadying breath, willing yourself to remain calm. Your mother places a gentle hand on your shoulder, eyes shining with unshed tears. "Tomorrow, you must look happy," she whispers. "People will gossip if you appear anything else." You meet her gaze, seeing her love mixed with fear, and you wish you could promise her the genuine joy she wants for you. Instead, you nod and offer a brittle smile. Outside, children's laughter echoes, bright and careless, a stark contrast to your heavy heart. You recall a childhood jest, that any bride who sobbed at her wedding got an extra hen, while the one who cried afterward risked losing her home. You force a rueful chuckle. "If that's true, I'd have a whole coop by now." As the last candle gutter dims, its feeble glow mirroring your flickering courage, you realize that tomorrow you will step onto the very stool they carved your perch into this new life. You brace yourself, shoulders squared, determined to face the unknown. The joy of your childhood is gone for now, replaced by a determination forged in duty and tempered with a spark of hope. You rise, hugging your parents tightly. "I'll do my best," you promise softly. Your father's arms tighten around you. Your mother turns away so you won't see her tears. In their embrace, you find a fragment of strength. Even if the marriage itself is a transaction, their love is your true inheritance. Stepping back into the yard, you inhale the sharp tang of sunset-bathed air. Though your future remains uncertain, you feel a surge of resolve. Tomorrow, you will climb onto that humble stool and greet the world as a married woman, heart pounding, yet resolute. Last night, beneath the final glow of sunset, you sighed and vowed that tomorrow you would step through that little stone doorway with as much courage as you could muster. Now, as darkness fully descends and the new moon peeks shyly through the treetops, you sit by the weather-worn window frame, listening to the nocturnal breeze whisper through the leaves. Before you stretches the dew-drenched rice field, silvered by moonlight, as if it knew the heaviness settling in your chest. This marriage was arranged when you were but a child, chasing hens in the yard. blissfully ignorant of love, excited only by distant hoofbeats. Memories of childhood flood back, you clutching your mother's skirt, her gentle guidance as you darted around the village without a care. Now, on the eve of your wedding, you realize your own choice was overshadowed by land deals and power plays. In the 14th century, the Roman Church formally declared marriage a sacred sacrament. Only when both parties truly consented at the altar would the union be recognized and unbreakable. History marks this as a pivotal moment that bolstered ecclesiastical authority over family life. Yet it also placed a crushing weight on the shoulders of young brides like yourself, forced to abandon any hope of love for solemn vows. You turn your gaze to the betrothal gifts strewn across the low table. A few sturdy hens, a roll of coarse linen, a simple stool hewn by your father's hands. Each item testifies to the transaction. The hens stand in for the bride price, the linen for the promise of protection, the stool for, well, your status in your husband's home. Every pin, every stitch you've sewn into your wedding shift tonight is double-edged, keeping up appearances while sealing the responsibility you never asked for. Silence reigns, broken only by the occasional drip of water leaking through the thatch roof, each plink echoing like a drumbeat of your own subdued heart. You close your eyes briefly, attempting to still the storm of thoughts. In your mind drifts a rare tidbit. In some remote alpine villages, a bride once hung a sprig of mistletoe over the doorway to ward off restless spirits, believing a failed marriage could unleash wandering shades. Historians still debate how widespread that custom ever was, but you remind yourself that no spectre could compare to the scrutiny awaiting you in tomorrow's bridal chamber. Outside, the chill wind sweeps across the open fields, carrying the mixed scents of damp earth and smoky tallow. Your heartbeats are no longer mere visceral rhythms. They record each moment of sorrow and tension. You gently brush the incense dust from the little home altar where your mother lit a final stick of incense at tonight's full moon vigil. Stepping back, you leave a faint swirl of ash behind you. Don't want to disturb the cinders of what faith you still cling to. At the far end of the room, your father approaches, eyes mingling pride with worry. He places a small bag in your hand coins to offer at the church for blessings on your union and tells you softly, "You may not be in love, but swear your heart to God's will." His voice rumbles like distant thunder, carrying the weight of tradition and the burden of family expectation. You remain silent, avoiding his gaze. History records many unions of young brides to men decades their senior, all sanctioned by church law, but you know none of that eases the ache in your chest. A hen crows just once in the stillness. Then silence returns. You let out a controlled breath and manage a wry smile. At least I'm not responsible for rearing all these chickens forever. It's a quiet jest, only you hear it, and you feel relief that the words are honest. The flickering tallow lamp throws dancing shadows on the rafters, like ocean waves cresting and falling above your head. You follow their rhythm, as though seeking a spiritual escape. In your heart, a fragile belief stirs. Even if the marriage was decided for land's sake, perhaps you can still cultivate your own life with determination. Loving yourself first, you tell yourself, will help you keep your identity intact in a world of unyielding conventions. You rise and glide toward the little shrine, brushing the last of the incense dust aside, then move to the door. The boards creak softly, announcing your departure. But unlike before, your steps now carry a newfound steadiness. You remind yourself of your mother's words, "Find courage to live fully." Clutching that, you know you can face whatever comes once you step into the dawn of tomorrow's wedding. Just then, the village church bell tolls, its clear note cutting through the night's Hushan echo of both past and future. You draw one deep, centering breath, channeling every ounce of resolve into your weary frame. You will walk down that aisle tomorrow. You will protect your spirit and stand unwavering, beneath the weight of dowries, the sanctity of vows, and the gaze of the entire village. And in that moment of commitment, your first true act of agency, you will become more than a bride. You will become the author of your own story. The last slant of late afternoon sun slips through the window as you finally set your needle aside. Your fingers sore from hours of stitching that scratchy fabric. Your gaze drifts to your younger sister sprawled on the straw mat. Utterly carefree, she hasn't to worry about tomorrow's vows turning her life upside down. You, on the other hand, are wrestling with a destiny not of your own making. Beside you, your mother fusses over the carved stool and comments, "He's sturdy, you know. You bite back a smirk sturdy. Must be medieval, for he still breathes. If that's the highest praise, you're bracing for quite the adventure. In the 14th century, peasant brides almost never chose their own husbands. These unions cemented alliances and secured land, not romance. A quirky tidbit whispers that some rural grooms would wear a tiny iron ring around their necks to show they could shoulder the farm's Berdenser practice. Historians still debate, wondering if it ever truly existed or was just folklore. In your mind, the groom is little more than a hazy image. Rough, flour, dusted hands from the mill, a grumble when you brush past him at market. You imagine him trudging through straw, grumbling about household chores, an echo of the murmurs you've heard from neighbors all week. Yet for a moment, amidst the ache in your palm and the hum of village life outside, you feel a spark of defiance. If sturdy is his greatest virtue, you'll lean into it and mount this marriage like a seasoned rider. Tomorrow's ceremony may bind you by church and contract, but tonight you claim this small victory, stitching your own shift, surviving on your own terms, and daring to wonder where this strange, sturdy journey will take you. Last night you finally tucked away your needle and thread, your fingers still smarting from hours spent mending that coarse linen. Now, just as the sky has deepened to ink and lanterns flicker through the thin walls, your father stumbles in, his clothes caked with mud from the evening's negotiations. A reek of cheap cider clings to him, a sad badge of the bitter haggling over land boundaries, farm tools, and even the dowry pig. He sways unsteadily, slumping onto the carved stool your mother so painstakingly polished, and emits a belch that rattles the rafters. Your mother's eyes flash in reproach as she scoots over to straighten the stack of parchments, the same contracts your father argued over until he could argue no more. "They're still insisting on another furlong of your family's meadow," she scolds, her voice tight with frustration. Your father waves a hand, scattering straw across the floor, and mumbles, "They want more pigs, more barley, as if we have an endless granary." The room echoes with clattering tools and earthenware rattling in the midst of this domestic battlefield. You press your lips together, heart pounding. If your own parents cannot come to terms without descending into drunken bickering, what hope is there for your wedding night, traditionally the grand finale sealing the covenant? Outside, through the open door, you hear dogs barking at the moon, the blacksmith's hammer ringing against the anvil, and raucous laughter rolling from the tavern down the lane. No one in the village will get any rest tonight, and the groom, if he is half as fond of drink as your father, may well be too drunk to remember his own duties. Part of you hopes he is. Yet self-pity only takes you so far. You rise and brush mud from your shift, recalling a rare historical footnote. In some villages of medieval England, a peasant bride would slip a sprig of rosemary into her bodice to ensure her groom remained sober through the vows. Scholars still debate whether that was practiced widely or merely a local quirk, but you find yourself wishing for even that slender talisman tonight. Your mother, on guard, watches you carefully. "Get some rest," she commands, though her tone holds no warmth. She, like so many mothers of betrothed daughters, has become a broker of futures, balancing family honor, church law, and community expectation on scales too heavy for any single woman to bear. You nod and move to the sleeping mat by the hearth, heart heavy with the knowledge that even in slumber you will be watched, measured by every twitch and sigh. Your father's snore rumbles through the hut, and you close your eyes, willing sleep to come. Yet the racket outside persists, cart wheels creaking, owls hooting, and that inevitable chant of the tavern patrons drunk on their own merriment. Tomorrow you will rise as a bride in the eyes of God and neighbor alike, but tonight you remain a daughter, bound by the same old arguments over land and livestock. You draw the rough woolen blanket up to your chin and breathe in its musty scent. Somewhere in the tangle of your thoughts, a spark of defiance flickers. You will not allow this bedlam to define you. If your marriage is to be a transaction, you will be its shrewdest merchant, trading not just hens and barley, but the last ounce of your dignity. And if the groom must arrive too drunk to remember his role, then perhaps you will find a sliver of freedom in his forgetfulness. As your father's snores meld with the night's symphony, you slip into a dream half-formed. In it, you stroll barefoot through dew-laden fields, free from contracts and cider fumes, free to choose whom to love and where to lay your head. And for that precious heartbeat, you taste a world untouched by the petty squabbles over pigs and plots, a world you will carry with you into the dawn, no matter what tomorrow brings. Last night's moonlight still clings to the walls when your mother gently guides you back into the hut. In her hand, she holds a weathered wooden comb, its teeth worn but still capable of untangling the knots of your messy hair. You settle on the narrow bench by the hearth, shoulders tense, and feel the faint prick of straw against your shiffled-over fragments from the night's haggling over your dowry. Your mother begins to comb, each tooth raking through tangled locks that haven't seen water since dawn. The rhythmic chick-chick echoes in the dim room lit by a single tallow candle. Outside, the village is stirring. Dogs bark at midnight phantoms. The blacksmith's hammer rings steady as an alarm, and drunks in the tavern below sing bawdy songs that drift through the cracks in the floorboards. You remember your father's stumbling words and the slur of his breath as he argued into the dusk over a few extra bushels of barley. Their squabble wasn't about love or joy-just property lines, livestock counts, and your future labor. Now, as the comb pulls gently at your scalp, you cling to the small comfort of the simple gesture. Even this intimate act of a mother caring for her daughter feels now tinged with melancholy. Tomorrow, the real ceremony will begin, the sacred yet humiliating bed-raising ritual, when midwives and relatives will usher you through the threshold into the wedding bed. In some regions, the desponsatio required 4 witnesses to guarantee that the marriage was consummateda, a stark reminder of how your body has become a token in a contract far larger than yourself. Scholars still debate whether these witnesses were always local women, or sometimes hired strangers brought in to validate the union, but to you, it matters little who stands in that circle of eyes. Your mother pauses her combing and brushes a stray wisp of hair from your forehead. "Hold still," she whispers, her voice thick with both affection and urgency. You feel the weight of her concern. She is not merely preparing your hair, she is bracing you for a public spectacle that will strip you of every last shred of privacy. With the final strokes of the comb, your hair falls into soft waves around your shoulders. You catch your reflection in a polished copper plate leaning against the wall. The face that stares back is pale, eyes wide and glassy with unshed tears. You are no longer the little girl who chased chickens in the courtyard. You are now a bride in name and obligation. Your mother sets aside the comb and retrieves a faded linen shiftone of the few fine garments you own. She lays it across your lap. "Wear this," she instructs, her tone softer but still firm. You slip out of the rough-patched shift you have worn for days and into the cleaner but still coarse linen. Its skirt feels stiff against your skin, a daily reminder that this marriage is anything but soft or gentle. She helps you fold the old shift into a bundler knot for sentimental keepsake, but to count toward the dowry. A handful of chickens, a bolt of cloth, that old stool your father carved all of it, will be handed over piece by piece. You realize that what's being gifted is really what your family needs to survive. Neighbors' goodwill, farmhands' loyalty, perhaps even the miller's protection against famine or raids. As your mother fastens the belt around your waist, you recall a rare footnote in a 14th century charter, describing a bride who slipped a sprig of rue into her sash to ward off ill fortune. Historians are divided on whether that was common practice, or simply a romanticized myth. You half wish you had such a charm now, anything to give you even a sliver of control over what lies ahead. Your mother straightens, brushes lint off her apron, and studies you with a mother's pride and fear. "Rest now," she murmurs, though both of you know sleep will be elusive. The comb and the shift, the straw and the candlelight, they have all set the stage for a ritual that feels more like a public trial than a holy sacrament. You close your eyes, leaning back against the cool wall. In the hush between your mother's footsteps and the tavern's fading laughter, you make a silent vow. However the night unfolds, you will hold on to the memory of this memento of your mother's gentle mercy in the center of a storm. No matter how many witnesses, no matter how many contracts, you will never let go of the tiny spark of agency that still burns within you. Outside, the dawn is still hours away, but in your heart, you feel the first flicker of dawn's promise, that one day you might step beyond these rituals and choose your own path. Until then, you will endure with every breath, every heartbeat, and the soft echo of a comb scraping through your hair as your quiet anthem of resistance. Night has deepened, and the hearth fire has dwindled to glowing embers. Your mother still sits beside you, tirelessly running her comb through your tangled hair, her whispered reminders weaving through the hush. Tomorrow, don't trip on the church threshold. Don't argue with the priest's sermons. And whatever you do, don't sip any of that sacramental wine, they might lace it with poison. Outside, The village sleeps fitfully. Dogs bark at phantom intruders. The blacksmith's hammer rings in the distance, and raucous laughter drifts up from the tavern where revellers stagger home. All around you, the world seems to hold its breath for the dawn. You crouch down to sort your trousseau one last time. The few humble tokens you'll offer as your dowry. A handful of hens, a patched blanket, that simple wooden stool your father carved in his off hours. No gilded gifts fit for royalty await you. These modest wares carry the weight of your family's future. Since the 11th century, peasant marriages have included a dowry, a small collection of goods the bride brings to her husband's household to prove her family's respectability and practical worth. By the 14th century, chroniclers note that these dowries had often dwindled to bare essentials, reflecting hard times in rural communities. Yet the stakes have never felt higher. If a single hen goes missing, rumor says your family will bear the stain of poverty for generations. Historians still debate whether that notion was widely believed or merely whispered in a few remote hamlets. But tonight, those stories cling to your nerves like cold dew. Your mother's comb pauses as she glances at you in the flickering ember light. "Rest your mind now," she murmurs, gently setting aside her worn wooden comb. "Soon you must guard your steps, your words, and your very breath under those church rafters." Steeling yourself, you gather the last scraps of linen and fold them with trembling fingers. The embers glow brighter for a moment, as if urging you onward. You feel the chill of dawn already pressing at the horizon, carrying with it all the gazes, the judgments, the alliances that will define your life after sunrise. In the quiet that follows, you lean into your mother's warmth one final time. The dowry items, the hens, the blanket, the stool are more than mere objects. They are your promise of loyalty, your ticket into a new family, and your frail shield against an uncertain future. Tomorrow, you will walk through the church doors, a bride. But tonight, as the last embers gutter out and the village's restless hum falls away, you close your eyes and vow to keep alive the spark of your own will. No matter how small your dowry or how heavy the expectations, you will not lose yourself in the bargain. Night has deepened into a hushed darkness, and the kitchen fire has dwindled to glowing embers that flicker like timid fireflies in the gloom. Your mother still sits by your side, methodically combing through your tangled hair with that worn wooden comb. Between each gentle tug of the bristles, she murmurs her final instructions for tomorrow. Whatever you do, don't trip on the church's threshold, don't argue with the priest's sermon, and don't dare sip any of that sacramental wine they say it can be laced with poison. In the silent hours, the only sounds are the soft scrape of her comb against your hair, the distant bark of a village dog, and the occasional clang of the blacksmith's hammer echoing from his forge. But these small comforts cannot chase away the knot in your stomach. Tomorrow is the day of the bridal dowry auction. You lower yourself to the dirt floor and gather your scant possessions one last time. A trio of scrawny hens, a patched woolen blanket that has seen you through many winters, and the simple wooden stool that your father carved by hand in his rare spare moments. These humble items, far from the gold and jewels of noble brides, will be displayed before the entire village at dawn, a public testament to your family's honor and your own worth. Since the 11th century, Christian doctrine has required brides to present a dowry, a tangible pledge of their family's respectability and practical contribution to the new household. By the 13th century, church councils had warned against dowry inflation, yet in rural communities it became common for families to mortgage nearly everything they owned just to secure a match. Historians still debate whether these local customs were widespread or confined to a few hard-pressed hamlets. But tonight, those debates feel as real as the rough wood of your stool under your fingers. Your mother pauses her combing, glances up, and sighs. "Go rest now," she whispers, laying aside the comb with deliberate care. "Tomorrow you must step out as a radiant bride, not the weary, frightened girl you feel inside." You force a small, grateful smile and tuck your hands beneath the edge of your shift. The embers glow more fiercely for a heartbeat, as though encouraging you to hold on to the tiniest spark of confidence. Outside, the night air stirs the thatch roof, and a shiver runs down your spine, not from cold, but from anticipation. Your thoughts drift back to tales your mother once told you of a poor miller's daughter who, having no proper dowry, fled her wedding morning in shame. Chroniclers from a neighbouring abbey recorded her story in the late 12th century as a cautionary tale about pride and poverty. They claimed she ran into the forest and vanished, never to be heard from again. Scholars still argue whether that account was true or mere legend. But tonight you feel the weight of those rumors pressing on your shoulders. Crouched in the dim glow, you carefully fold each piece of linen. The coarse wool blanket feels scratchy against your palms, yet it holds the warmth of countless nights by the hearth. The hens cluck softly in their makeshift pen outside, oblivious to the significance of tomorrow's auction. And the wooden stool, solid but unadorned, serves as a reminder that strength can be simple. Your mother rises, draping the blanket over your shoulders. "Rest your mind, daughter," she says, placing a gentle hand on your shoulder. "Dawn will come soon enough, and with it, your new life." You nod, leaning your head against her hand as if seeking reassurance. In that moment, the world outside seems to fade the tavern's raucous laughter. The midnight squabble over land disputes, even the gossip-laden whispers about your lucky match, feel distant. Here, by the dying embers, you find a fragile peace. Before you settle under the straw mattress, your mother presses a kiss to your brow. "May God grant you strength," she breathes. In her eyes, you see pride and sorrow intertwined, as though she mourns the end of your childhood even as she prepares you for your new role. You lie back, the rough straw beneath you, and pull the patched blanket up to your chin. The hut is silent now, save for the gentle crackle of the last ember. Outside, a cool breeze carries the scent of damp earth and moth-eaten wool. In the half-light, you close your eyes and allow your thoughts to drift. You imagine yourself at sunrise, walking down the village lane in your simple shift. Spectators will line the cobbled path, their curious eyes following every step. You will stand before the makeshift auction table, where neighbors will appraise your hens, your blanket, your stool, each item dissected in public. Your face will burn with shame and pride mingled, as you silently vow not to let them see your fear. And yet, beneath that promise lies another. The faint hope that perhaps, in this new household, you might carve out your own place. The furnace of expectation may be hot, but you are no clay to be shaped without resistance. You will endure and maybe, just maybe, find small moments of joy in the life that awaits you. The embers wink out. The thatch above you rustles one final time. You feel the hush of anticipation settle in your bones. Somewhere beyond the walls, the cuckoo bird calls to the moon, as if marking the last hour before dawn. Sleep comes at last, soft and thin, carrying you toward a morning you cannot yet know. But in that fragile dream, you walk upright, chickens clucking at your heels, blanket draped over your arm, stool balanced on your shoulder, a bride ready to face whatever comes with quiet resolve. Night had settled into a deep silence, the hearth's fire reduced to glowing embers that cast a faint, comforting warmth on the worn walls. Dawn was still hours away, but before it broke, you would need to display every piece of your dowry, those crucial items your family had prepared for weeks. You inhale a steady breath and let your gaze drift over the corner of the cottage where they are neatly arranged. A clutch of clucking hens huddled in a simple wooden cage, a stout earthenware water jug sealed with a wooden stopper, a small iron pot meant for cooking maize porridge at sunrise, and the hand-woven blanket that you and your mother had painstakingly spun and woven through countless freezing winter nights, your fingertips raw and bleeding from the coarse wool. Since you were a child, you've heard your father proudly recount the peculiar custom of bedding rights, the privilege granted to the groom of using half of your family's straw mattress on the first night. According to a 12th century monk's chronicle, this practice originally symbolized generosity and hospitality, later evolving into a test of a bride's family honor. By the 14th century, scholars still debate whether bedding rights were widespread across Europe or limited to a handful of villages along the Rhine. But tonight, that controversy feels as tangible as the rough wood of your stool under your fingertips. You crouch and gently rest your linen gloves on the stool, remembering yesterday afternoon when you and your mother spread the blanket over the frame of the straw mattress. The faint scent of worn wool and campfire mingled with the flicker of candlelight as you braided herbs into the cornice each knot and stitch, saturated with laughter and whispered hopes for your future. Now, each dowry item is more than mere goods. They are carriers of memory. You touch the water jug and recall carrying fresh spring water with your mother at dawn. You glance at the iron pot and remember the smoky kitchen where you stirred soup for your younger siblings, dreaming of a time when you weren't bound by these expectations. The hen's soft clucks echo through the silent cottage, oblivious to the spectacle that will greet them come morning. In the villages you've known, since the 11th century, a bride's dowry was the first benchmark by which her worth was judged. Local customs once required families to lay out the dowry at the church steps for public appraisal, a practice the church frowns upon, but never quite eradicated. Today, you realize that tomorrow your modest offerings will be examined, discussed, and compared like commodities in a market. Steeling yourself, you stand and run a hand through your hair as the wind rattles the thatch above, carrying the distant clamour of revellers at the tavern. You cannot escape that chorus of gossip, snippets of jealousy, speculation, and rumour swirl beyond these walls. But here, in the hearth's dying glow, you draw a line. You will face the crowd at dawn with your head held high. You take your mother's comber simple wooden tool and pause as she gently untangles a knot. Her fingers are steady, but her eyes betray a mother's sorrow at seeing her daughter on the cusp of an unknown life. "Rest now, my child," she whispers. "Tomorrow you must appear as the perfect bride, not the anxious girl you feel inside." You muster a small, grateful smile and tuck your hands beneath your neck. The embers flare for a breath, as if imparting strength, then settle back into a steady glow. Outside, every sound is magnified. A barn owl's distant hoot, the rhythmic clank of the blacksmith's hammer, an unposted sermon bell from the chapel. In these moments before sleep, you recall an old tale told by the Abbey chronicler, a miller's daughter who, lacking a proper dowry, vanished from her own wedding morning. Some say she would rather flee than endure public shame. Historians still argue whether the story is a myth or a cautionary record, but tonight it whispers to you, strength can come through unexpected escape. You return each dowry item to its place, feeling the weight of tradition pressed down on you. The hens, the jug, the pot, the blanket each carries your family's hopes and your own. You pause at the blanket, remembering the nights you and your mother shared over its weaving. Your stitches breathless with cold, your breath visible in the lamplight. Those tender memories now serve as your armor against the dawn's scrutiny. Your mother stands, drapes the blanket across your shoulders, and kisses your forehead. "May God grant you courage," she murmurs. In her eyes you see fierce pride and lingering grief over the end of your girlhood. You nod, pull the blanket snug, and settle onto the straw mattress. The coarse blanket grazes your cheek, a reminder that comfort and hardship are inseparable in your life. As you lie back, the embers dim to darkness. The only light is that of a single star peeking through a crack in the roof. You close your eyes, letting your mind wander to dawn's arrival. Stepping onto the path where neighbours in their worn cloaks will line up, curious eyes bright with speculation. You will stand before the makeshift auction table as they assess your every item, whispering judgments that echo long after. In the quiet of that slumber, you allow yourself a small dream. You walk unbowed, carrying your dowry with quiet dignity, your mother's comb tucked in your hair, your hand on the wooden jug, your blanket folded over your arm. You are both product and witness of centuries-old customs, yet you remain yourself a young woman determined to meet whatever dawn brings. Sleep arrives softly, the world of embers and memories receding. And as your breath deepens, you find solace in the knowledge that, in the earliest glow of morning, you will stand before them all hen by hen, stitch by stitch, and claim your place in the story yet to unfold. As the first light of dawn breaks, you shyly lean down to the windowsill, letting the fresh morning breeze wash over you as you try to shake off the chill that's settled in your bones after a sleepless night. The clatter of an ox cart carrying chickens from the slaughterhouse rattles through the yard, nudging your mind awake. Today marks the day you officially cross the threshold into married life. You set the small iron pot down by the well and, with trembling hands, scoop up ladles of that bone-numbing cold water, each splash stabbing ice through your fingertips and making your heart clench. In folk stories, they say the water used to wash a bride must come from the deepest part of the well, to ward off evil spirits and ensure her strength. And right now, you believe it. From somewhere beyond the eaves, the village bell tolls the Qingming festival, its echo both solemn and celebratory, reminding everyone that this is no ordinary morning. Outside, your neighbours have already gathered under the ancient banyan tree. Patched shawls and rough homespun skirts brush against one another as curious eyes peer in, soft with sympathy and tinged with anticipation. In a hamlet of only a few hundred souls, news of a bridal foot washing spreads like wildfire. The itinerant singers in the shade are softly chanting, and a group of elderly women chuckle, declaring, "We must wash her clean today, so she won't shame herself when she's led to the marriage bed tomorrow." You step behind the flimsy bamboo curtain, bare feet still frosted with the night's cold. Your mother stands beside a low wooden stool, tucking the lopsided pot of water out of the cookfire's smoke. The mingled scent of hearth smoke and damp wool hangs in the air, oddly comforting despite the chill. Without a word, your mother reaches for the faded gown your cousin's old flax dress from last harvest, its hem still dusted with flour from the threshing floor. There is no spa, no perfumed oils, just you, standing in a thin shift, as she carefully lifts the fabric over your head and combs through your knotted hair with a simple wooden comb that keeps catching and tearing tufts of your tangled locks. The old custom of washing a bride's feet is meant to bring fertility and safeguard her womb, but today your mother upends ladles of frigid well water over your slender ankles. Each icy rush sends tremors up your calves until you can barely keep your teeth from chattering. Muttering, she says, "Do it well tomorrow, they'll praise how bravely you bathe." You grit your teeth and endure, determined to appear composed and ladylike, unwilling to give the gossip mongers any fodder for their whispers. As your mother brushes aside stray wisps of hair, your eyes drift to the family altar on the wall. Your ancestors' worn portraits look down on you, silent witnesses to your fate. The coins they painstakingly amassed for your wedding have bought you half a straw-filled mattress, a handful of chickens, and that patched blanket. Your father once quoted a 14th century chronicle that insisted a bride's assent at the altar was essential, yet the real pressure came not from God but from kin and custom. You quietly smile at the irony, so many rules and rites, yet none of them asked how you felt. Your mother then hands you a small clay pitcher of warm water, infused with sprigs of holy basil she gathered at dawn. "This," she says, "is the true foot wash, gentle, fragrant, and protective." You breathe a sigh of relief and allow yourself a small laugh. She smiles back, pride softening her stern expression. "You'll need every ounce of strength for tomorrow. Let them see you're no fragile flower." "I may." The bell strikes a second time, signaling the hour to prepare for the procession to the chapel. You shrug off your damp shift and step into the cousin's linen gown, its cool fabric brushing against your skin like a promise. As the warmth of the water finally seeps into your bones, the last remnants of the night's chill fade away. You steady yourself, feeling your mother's steady gaze fill you with reluctant courage. Yes, challenges lie ahead, but there will also be moments of quiet hope. Once your feet are dry and your hair braided with wildflowers your mother picked from the roadside, you stand upright and step through the bamboo doorway into the soft morning light. Outside, lanterns sway in gentle breezes, their flickering glow dancing across the dirt floor. You take a breath of the cool air and fold your hands over your gown's bodice, realizing that tomorrow you will bear not only those humble dowry items, but also the weight of your family's expectations and the memories woven into every stitch. The foot-washing ceremony finishes with your mother's quick embrace and a whispered, "You are ready." You nod, offering her a thin smile, even though a storm of emotions still churns inside you. Tonight you might be the village's newest bride, stepping into a world that never quite feels like your own. But despite the damp wool, the smoke-tinged air, and the village bell's relentless chime, you steel yourself. You will walk forward with steady feet, because out there, beyond these walls, lies a life you must face and shape with your own two hands. In the moment your hand touches that faded blue wedding dress, the coarse wool against your skin pricks like tiny needles. Every patch along the seams at your waist reminds you of the hours your mother and cousin spent stitching it back together. You tremble slightly as you slip it on misplaced pull, and the fabric might well tear. In fact, as early as the 14th century, wool was the go-to material for peasant wedding garment, saffordable, warm in winter, and hard-wearing. But it hardly feels fitting for a bride on her wedding day. Your mother steps forward and gently places a crown of wildflowers atop your head-delicate blossoms that seem to glow in the morning dew. She murmurs that these flowers will ward off evil spirits, ensuring you enter the church pure and protected. You obey, but inside you wonder if she's simply trying to distract attention from the frayed collar and worn hem. Historically, the custom of adorning brides with wildflower crowns traces back to agrarian folk beliefs that plant spirits could guard against misfortune. Scholars still debate how widespread this tradition really was. Some say it was limited to certain northern European villages, while others argue it was pan-continental. But in this moment, The crown feels less like protection than a flimsy veil over your doubts. Your little sister stands by a wooden basket near the bed, her face bright in the sunrise. She giggles and teases. "You look like a saint right out of the church fresco." You shoot her a glare you can't blame her innocence, but her words sting. You pull your shoulders back, trying to ignore the cold shock of the wool and focus on the task at hand. The midwife, an elderly woman in a threadbare apron, leans in to whisper her final instructions. "Don't look up at the crowd, or they'll see your fear." Then she hisses, "Don't trip on the church steps. That's an omen of bad luck." Finally, she warns, "And under no circumstances argue with the priest, no matter how long his sermon drags on." Each admonition settles over you like another weight pressing down. You draw a deep breath, trying to steady the whirlwind in your mind. The scratchy dress, the wildflower wreath, the expectant faces beyond the doorway, and the tolling church bells counting down the moments. Your mother stands just behind you, concern etched in every line of her face. She's sacrificed so much so that today you can become a bride, and she hopes you will follow every rule to secure the family's place in the village. You know she's not doing this out of superstition alone. These rituals bind you into the community's web of alliances and traditions. As you lower your gaze to button the bodice, you catch sight of yourself in a small, polished mirror. A thin, anxious figure in coarse wool. You recall your mother's earlier remark about the groom being sturdy in this village. That's praise for simply being alive. You suppress a bitter smile. If sturdy is the highest compliment, you're in for quite an adventure. Outside, the first village drums begin to beat, signaling the bridal procession is about to start. You feel your mother's hand on your arm, guiding you toward the front door. In that instant, you realize that even the modest dress and humble crown of flowers are part of a long-standing ritual that demands obedience and sacrifice. Stepping onto the threshold, you feel the rough wood under your wool-clad feet. Behind you, the embers in the hearth glow softly, a reminder of the night's small victories baking bread, enduring the midwife's orders, braving whispers in the dark. Ahead of you stretches the dusty path to the church, lined with curious neighbors and eager children. You take one last steadying breath and step outside. The morning sun bathes the thatched roofs in gold, the air carries the scent of hay and hearth smoke, and the distant chiming of the church bell fills your ears. Despite every doubt, you move forward. You are no longer just a daughter of this cottage. You are a bride about to join two families under the watchful eyes of God and the village. And as you walk toward the awaiting procession, you hold in your heart a small ember of hope, that within these old customs and hidden glances, you might yet find a spark of your own inner strength to endure, and perhaps even to thrive. As you and your mother step through the gate, the wedding procession begins like a river of people flowing past your humble cottage's threshold. Your gown picks up patches of red dust from the dirt road, and your stiff shoes bob with every step. The church bells toll across the village, mingling with laughter, and the excited shouts of children chasing after the procession, an uproarious spectacle, in which you are the uninvited star. You grit your teeth, struggling to keep your balance in the slick mud, while your mother whispers, "Be careful not to trip, don't give them cause to laugh." The bridal parade winds through leaning thatch-roofed houses and hedges woven from thorny branches. There is no carpet of flowers, only the churned earth still damp from last night's rain. From the far end of the village, the clang of drums and cymbals announces that the celebration will spill out beyond the churchyard into the open field. You sigh to yourself. You wonder if your groom remembered to bring a clean cloth to wipe his hat, or if he'll leave you to slog through mud without a second thought. Once you arrive at the outdoor banquet, the air is heavy with the scent of boiled potatoes and pickled turnip staple fare for a medieval wedding feast. The pork is stewed until tough, and the ale is watered down like well water. Everyone believes that spilled ale on the ground brings good fortune, so puddles of watered-down brew dot the grass. You edge carefully around each one, lest someone decide to splash you for extra luck. According to historians, since the 14th century, peasant wedding feasts in rural Europe were often held in communal spaces. Village greens, or barnyard stow, share leftover food after harvest, and to reinforce social bonds. This gathering not only celebrates the marriage, but also cements alliances among neighbors. Surrounded by the jostling crowd, you feel like a sheep being led to market your wedding, turned into public entertainment. Curious glances, fingers pointing at your dusty hem, Whispers of, "There's the bride, covered in mud," all tighten the knot in your stomach. Your mother guides you toward a long wooden bench where aunties and cousins crowd around, passing plates and clinking cups. Here's an unusual detail. In some villages, it was said that if the bride lightly touched the communal ladle of stew to her gown, she would be blessed with plenty and prosperity for life. A giant ladle is placed at the center of the table, and you must tiptoe in your muddy dress to dip a spoonful into your handkerchief. You force a wry smile torn between the fear of tearing your patched linen and the worry of staining it with stew. Historians still debate how widespread this stew blessing custom really was, your mother murmurs, recalling a lecture on folk traditions she once attended. Some records suggest it was a common ritual to ward off misfortune. Others dismiss it as a local rumor. All you know in this moment is that you would give anything for a quiet corner with just your mother, instead of being the center of every whisper. As you steady the ladle, your face betrays a flicker of resignation. The crowd applauds, treating your awkward blessing like entertainment. Your mother gently steers you away. "Come sit," she urges. "Your father will speak soon." Hev. You squeeze onto the rickety bench, the wood rough beneath your skirt. Beside you, the groom the miller's sturdy son with flour-dusted hands laughs with his friends, looking more at ease than you feel. For a fleeting second, you wonder, will he notice how exhausted you are, trudging through mud and ritual? Tonight, as the embers of the day die, will he see your weary eyes? You close your eyes and offer a silent prayer that the bells will stop ringing and the crowd will dissipate, leaving only the two of you. But when you open them, the long table under the blue sky remains laden with bowls of root vegetables and jugs of poppy seed ale. You resume your cautious feast, aware that your village's expectations of land, labor, and lineage rest on every bite. Even if your shoes are cramped and your dress threadbare, you lift your chin and play your part. This day, no matter how muddy, awkward, or overwhelming's the most important one of your life, at least in your village's eyes. You draw in a deep breath as the wedding feast continues, the air thick with the scent of wood ash and sweet stews. Foaming barrels of ale sit in the courtyard, candlelight dancing on their rims. On the tables, the menu offers only boiled turnips, mashed potatoes, and tough pork, yet no one cares about flavor. This is a test of endurance rather than a meal. You clutch a heavy clay mug, lips pressed tight to keep the ale from spilling. All across the village, hundreds of eyes fix on you, every casual smile or sidelong glance feeling like a blade against your heart. "Stay sharp tonight," the midwife whispers in your ear, so our bloodline carries on. By the 14th century, rural wedding feasts were not merely communal celebrations, but also a way to confirm the bride's ability to serve as a wife. A ritual that secured the groom's family's interests and proved the bride would contribute to the marriage. Historical records even show that some noble families embraced similar trials, though the intensity varied by class. You force a shaky smile when the groomsmen hoist their mugs and cheer, "Drink up so you'll be strong tonight." They tease you about what's to come, turning your cheeks a hot shade of crimson. The crack of applause, the clip-clop of horses passing the village green, all of it sends sharp pangs through your chest. Ale isn't just poured into mugs, some is poured onto the ground. An age-old belief that spilled drink brings blessings to the crops. You sidestep each puddle, heart sinking at every splash. Here's a lesser-known detail. In certain old Central European villages, brides were expected to drink from an ox horn as a fertility charm, believed to ensure plentiful offspring. Historians still debate whether this horn-drinking custom was truly widespread or merely a whispered legend among hamlets. But as you taste that icy horn's bitterness, your pulse races as never before, whether divine favor or mere superstition. You cannot tell. Meanwhile, a stream of villagers passes by, wagering on whether you will seal the vow by dawn or falter after only 3 cups. Some have even staked the last rooster from their coop. You smile, really a bride, reduced to an item on the market. Each reluctant sip feels like another weight added to your shoulders. Finally, your parents take your trembling hands and guide you away from the feast, steering you through a narrow fork in the courtyard path toward the church. The revelry feels endless. Each bowl, each gulp, each roar of laughter trails you across the muddy lane. The church bells ring out bold yet somber, announcing the turning point of your life. You wonder, if this is only the beginning, will there ever be a moment of privacy for you? As night fully settles, Stars sparkle overhead but grant little light. You step over the threshold of the stone church as if entering a labyrinth of vows and faith. The scent of incense mixes with damp wool, making your head swim. A priest's commanding voice intones prayers of duty and obedience, and you look up at the high lanterns, their glow flickering over the cold stone floor. Exhaustion and apprehension mingle in your heart. This pivotal moment still lies ahead, yet you are already spent before the ceremony even begins. You pause to adjust the patch on your skirt, and your mother's soft admonition reaches you. Stand tall and watch your step on the threshold. You exhale in resignation. Tomorrow's trial will be far greater, but at least now you know that this wedding is not only a sacred ritual, is a test of a bride's endurance, willpower, and honor. You close your eyes, inhale deeply, and summon every ounce of courage to move forward. You step slowly into the church's vault-like space, filled with the lingering scent of incense and the soft glow of countless candles, your mind still reeling from the boisterous feast outside. The laughter and clinking cups have given way to the solemn tolling of the great bells echoing beneath the cold stone arches. The priest appears at the altar in deep crimson vestments, his voice resonant in ancient Latin as he reminds you of your duty to obey and the self-sacrifice expected of a wife. You attempt to repeat each vow, "I do," but your ears ring in the dense haze of smoke. A well-documented fact. By the 13th century, the Roman Church had officially declared marriage a sacrament, turning the wedding into an unbreakable sacred covenant. When the priest places the heavy iron ring on your finger, he speaks not of a symbol of love, but of ownership under medieval law. Iron, far from a noble metal, was nonetheless prized in peasant communities for its durability, much like the binding promise you now shoulder. An obscure detail. In many rural regions of Europe, wedding rings were forged from iron or lead rather than gold, since precious metals were reserved for nobility. Folk belief held that the weight and strength of iron would ward off malevolent spirits on the wedding night. You glance at the solid band on your finger, wondering if it's meant to protect you or tether you. The priest's sermon shifts to the concept of the marital debt, the idea that spouses owe each other a physical duty, and failure to fulfill it renders all rites meaningless. Historians still debate how widespread this doctrine truly was. Some argue it was rigorously applied across all classes. Others claim it was largely rhetorical for the elite. For you, standing in this hushed nave, the warning feels less like theology and more like a prophecy of dread. Your feet throb in the stiff, ill-fitting shoes roof, rigid, exactly like the fate that awaits you. Each step you take echoes across the cold flagstones, as relentless as a war drum, reminding you there's no turning back. The incense smoke clings to your hair and clothing, sweet and suffocating, a stark contrast to the boozy warmth of the feast just hours before. The congregation presses in around you, faces lit by flickering candlelight, every eye fixed on your trembling form. When the priest proclaims you man and wife in God's eyes, the crowd erupts in cheers. She's now another man's wife, and a wave of relief washes over you. The ceremony is over, yet relief and grief comb your heart, for you have exchanged one burden for another. Stepping out into the night air, you feel the moonlight cool your flushed cheeks. The street outside the church is hushed, but for the crackle of drying leaves and the distant hum of late-night revelers. You straighten your back and try to shake off the weight of the vows, though the new reality clings like dew on your dress. Your mother's voice flutters in your memory, gentle but insistent. You are now his wife. Prepare yourself for tonight. You nod, drawing your shawl tighter around your shoulders, the oversized cloak doing little to mask your exhaustion. Today's ceremony was more than a religious rite, cemented an alliance between families. Tomorrow, you will follow your husband to his home by the mill, where the adjoining strip of land will join your family's fields forever. The smoke of incense has barely cleared before the next trial begins. The bedding ritual, where your pledge of fidelity and duty must be proved in the world's eyes. The lantern above the church door guttered out, the breeze carrying the scent of damp grass and the sound of distant laughter. You inhale deeply, steeling yourself for the night ahead, knowing that this is only the beginning of a life bound by obligation. Under that bright moon, you take your first step into the new chapter of your existence as a medieval bride, just 16 or 17, certain only of the path laid out before you, and determined to face whatever comes next. Your eyes still sting from the incense smoke of the church ceremony, as relatives and neighbours jostle you and the groom down the rutted dirt path toward the old grain mill. Laughter and whispered chatter swirl around you in an unceasing, clamorous tide, robbing you of even a single moment's peace. Only hours ago you shivered at the proclamation that you were now someone else's wife, and now you tremble at the thought that your body is about to be traded as part of a family alliance. Each barefoot, mud-slicked step sends a cold shock up your legs, while distant dogs bark through the winter straw stacks. When the door to the bridal chamber clicks shut behind you, pitch darkness envelops the room, relieved only by the feeble flicker of a few torches. In their weak, yellow glow, the simple wooden bed frame and mound of straw look like a rickety dais in a cramped theatre. You draw in a sharp breath, feeling as though the entire village surrounds you, awaiting your opening performance. This is the well-known medieval rite of bedding, a ceremony common since the 1200s, intended to prove that the marriage has been consummated in the most literal sense. Many families then treated this ritual as irrefutable legal proof of the union. Your mother-in-law nonchalantly pulls a heavy bronze flagon of ale from her apron and, with a quick wink to the assembled women, offers you the traditional shot. "Drink this down to fortify you for tonight," she says. They titter among themselves, exchanging teasing glances. The sour, watered-down brew burns your throata, piercing reminder of rural hardship, and, ironically, the liquid courage meant to strip away a bride's last reserves of modesty before she fulfills her marital debt. Oddly enough, it was widely believed that the stronger the drink, the more successful the bedding would be. Reeling from the potent draught, you fumble for whatever privacy you can find in the tiny chamber. Here's a little-known fact. In some northern European villages, a white sheet was draped outside the bedroom door the next morning to signal a successful night, though many communities abandoned the practice for fear the bride and groom wouldn't perform in time. Historians still debate how widespread this custom really was, and whether it was a local superstition or a pan-European tradition of the Middle Ages. You tremble as you peel your hands off the thick wool dress and lay them on the bed's edge. In the torchlight, your slender frame seems dangerously fragile. All around you, sighs, shrugged shoulders, and whispered cheers punctuate the air, seasoning your fear, anger, and feeling of betrayal on this most momentous night. The rain that had fallen earlier has paused, leaving the damp earth to splash against your calves with every shift. You try to summon calm by recalling gentler memories, the splash of well water on your face, the lilting song of a skylark at dawn. But in an instant, those images dissolve under a sharp command. "Hurry up, there's no time to waste," bellows an aunt, thrusting you forward. You can only nod numbly, inwardly begging for the tiniest escape, just enough to slip through a gap in the window and melt into the night. Pulling the patched wool blanket up to your knees, you reveal your bare, chilled feet. In that instant, you recognize there is nothing romantic about this wedding night. It feels more like a clan-sponsored contest, where the bride must fight not only for one successful evening, but for the right to keep even a whisper of privacy, for survival, for a sliver of hope that your future might still be your own. In the torchlight's dancing glow, you stand like a warrior stepping into battle, your spirit taut and your heart on the verge of breaking. At that moment, the priest appears in the doorway, solemnly reminding you of your bodily duty to your husband, the final admonition before the marital debt is called due. Your breath catches. Every vow uttered this morning, every ritual performed all day long, now feels like a flimsy scrap of parchment fluttering before an unblinking crowd. A burst of laughter echoes again, but this time you realize it's not just the villagers laughing. It's you, too, caught in a destiny you can neither dissolve nor escape. Amid the vendors' taunts, the well-wishers' cries, you clutch the blanket's edge, vowing to hold on to whatever strength remains. Outside, the last night breeze stirs, flickering the torchlight. You close your eyes, feeling your body soften, as if drifting into a dream, wishing, with every fiber of your being, that when you wake, everything will be different, even though you know it's only a fragile hope. But for a medieval bride like you, even a dream must be fought for. As you step onto the straw, all those watching become your audience, and you trembling emerge as the heroine of your own story, braver than ever before. You step into that straw-strewn chamber once more, the echo of well-wishers' laughter still lingering outside the narrow door. The wedding feast has long since ended. The church bells have tolled their final hour, an unspoken announcement that the marital debt must now be fulfilled. the wedding night. Your relatives cluster in hushed groups just beyond the threshold, whispering about the proof of consummation they eagerly await. Each heavy breath from your mother-in-law, each pursed-lip glance from the midwife, dares you to cross this final boundary. The pile of straw on the floor has become your cramped marriage bed, dank and musty, not a private sanctuary but a public stage. This ritual of bedding dates back to the 13th through 15th centuries across Europe, intended as incontestable proof that a marriage had been carried out in the most literal sense. Rumor has it that if a bride failed her duty, her family risked forfeiting the dowry. Historians still debate whether the bedding ceremony was ever legally mandated or if it remained a folk custom with regional variations. But to you, it is an unbearable burden. The fresh flowers woven into your hair have long since wilted, their petals scattered among the musty straw. Your linen dress, already smeared with mud from yesterday's procession, bears the weight of your reluctant journey down that slippery path. A modern bride might smile at the thought, but for you, these are harsh reminders. Tonight is not for dreamy romance. The groom brushes his shoulder against yours in a tentative gesture. "Such pressure," he murmurs, his voice cracking with nerves. It isn't poetry, but it warms your heart, just enough proof that you are not alone in this cramped room. Psychologically, it is a rare moment of solidarity. In the midst of ritualistic violence, someone stands beside you. Murmurs rise as the women tease, "Get ready to sow your fields, dear." Their laughter cuts sharper than any blade, each jest a needle pricking at your dignity. This is no celebration of love, but a literal test to see if you measure up to the dowry you brought. Your body feels like a commodity, inspected for worth. Yet in that cruel moment, you spot a tiny crack in the facade. Both you and the groom share this same ordeal. Bound by identical pressures, two strangers find unexpected common ground: fear, yes, but also the fragile hope of mutual support. You recall your first meeting in the village square, his awkward bow as he greeted you amid sacks of grain. Now his battered greeting offers a flicker of comfort. You draw in a deep breath: straw, worn linen, a trace of damp wool, and the fading scent of tallow candles. These are the odors of your childhood. Helping your mother in the fields, the scrape of the hoe against earth, your mother's lullabies at dusk. Those memories become a thin shield against the terror of the bedding rite. Even here, you remind yourself, a small spark of strength remains. The midwife leans in, her voice low yet insistent. "Do your duty, dear, lest the family's honor be lost." You do not care for your family's reputation. Your own, however, you would guard fiercely. Each step you take across that squeaking straw bed creaks like a verdict, but you find your pulse quickening in defiance rather than despair. Your body, once a frightened wreck, now begins to brace itself. By custom, you should undress fully. Yet in the dim half-light, you shed only your outer layer, clinging to a fragment of modesty, a brief, silent rebellion. The groom's eyes flick down in understanding. In that split second, he realizes how precious your last scrap of privacy is. Outside the chamber, a distant dog barks. The wind sighs through gaps in the old millhouse walls, and the straw shifts underfoot, an unsettling soundtrack to this family drama. You recall a quirky tidbit from distant northern lands, where some villages hung pure linen sheets outside their doors the next morning as proof of a bride's first night. Scholars still argue how widespread that custom truly was, whether it was mere rumor or a genuine pan-European practice. But here and now, that strange tradition feels almost comforting by comparison. You retreat your gaze to the wall, summoning every ounce of calm you can muster. After a heartbeat, the groom reaches for your hand, an act so unexpectedly tender it feels like a lifeline. "We'll get through this together," he whispers. In that moment, the icy dread thaws just a little. Beyond the door, the last of the women's laughter fades. Within the rickety planks, you cling to a single resolve. Tonight, you will fight for your right to choose, if only to breathe on your own terms, if only to meet his gaze without fear. And as the final shout of encouragement drifts in from the hallway, you rise beside the groom and take that step toward the bed of straw, ready to face the final trial. But this time, at least, you will not be alone. When the last torch gutters out, leaving only a sliver of light from the window frame, you and the groom curl yourselves under the coarse, threadbare blanket. The sudden hush is so rare you can hear his steady breathing and unspoken apology. For the first time, you realize you are not entirely alone. He trembles and stammers just as you do, Your heart's pounding under the weight of this wedding night trial. You offer a faint smile, your fingers sinking into the rough wool beneath the covers as you squeeze his hand. In that stillness, you imagine the fragile seed of affection taking root. Tonight is not merely a race to fulfill the so-called marital debt, but a test of empathy and mutual understanding between two young souls. A noteworthy historical fact. In the 14th century, the Roman Church formally decreed that marriages must be consummated immediately after the ceremony to validate the union. This bedding ceremony obliged every bride to sleep with her husband in front of witnesses. So many communities believed that if the bride failed to reach the marital bed on time, the marriage itself was considered incomplete. But here's an odd tidbit most don't know. In certain Breton villages of medieval France, brides were given hairpins carved from whalebone, strange talismans meant to ward off sea spirits and protect against nightmares on the wedding night. You smile to yourself, wondering if such a charm might have kept the chill at bay tonight. Historians still debate whether the bedding rite sprang from ancient folk customs or was strictly enforced by the church, and whether it was sometimes abused to coerce legal consent. But to you, those scholarly arguments are faint echoes behind the covers, your chilled hands clasped together in the dark. You muster a wry joke. Well, at least we won't have to worry about tripping over church steps. We'll be slipping under these covers instead. He chuckles softly, a warm sound in the cold room. The night wind sighs through the door crack, carrying the lingering scent of smoky tallow. You close your eyes and focus on each breath, each heartbeat a silent lullaby amid the damp straw. Brief childhood memories flutter, playing beneath the old apple tree, sparrows heralding summer's arrival, and the sweet aroma of corn cakes fresh from your mother's oven a stark contrast to this tense night. You release a relieved sigh. At least my parents didn't swaddle me in a boat just in this ragged blanket. He laughs again, a gentle comfort that banishes the last tendrils of your anxiety. And so, amid the dying embers and the blanket's faint warmth, you find solace. This night is less a purely physical ordeal and more a trial of shared courage. The mud on your bare feet and the stains on your linen gown become silent marks of solidarity with a stranger who shares your fear. You inhale deeply, the fresh scent of damp grass drifting under the door, and think how sometimes warmth doesn't come from flickering candles but from knowing you are not alone. Once more, you smile, feeling a small glow in your chest and he have braved the loneliest moment together. You muse, almost to yourself. Honestly, if we studied for this, we'd ace it. Finally, you fold into sleep, your heartbeat drifting in time with the night wind. In the tallow smoke and damp straw, two young souls float into their dreams, the distant laughter fading into a gentle rhythm that carries you toward a small hope for a future not entirely written by others. As the last torches gutter out, and a pale dawn mist clings to the window panes, you slowly open your eyes. A rooster's crow from the village square sounds like the day's opening fanfare. Lying on the stiff straw mattress beside him, you realize with a start that you weren't truly alone last night. The warmth of his body pressed against yours speaks more loudly than any pledge. The damp, earthy scent of the straw and the lingering aroma of old incense still hang in the air, silent witnesses to the journey you've just completed. You swing your legs over the side of the bed and spot the wooden clogs set neatly at the footer, 14th century custom, marking the bride's first step into married life. Medieval magistrates once declared this a legal sign that the wedding night's duties were fulfilled. You can't help a wry smile. What a welcome gift. Those clogs certainly not the soft slippers you might have wished for. Scanning the room, you notice the cracked teacup you used yesterday. Here's a quirky tidbit few know. In some Burgundian hamlets, brides would place a porcelain cup of chamomile tea by their bedside, believing the floral scent would ward off lonely spirits and protect them from nightmares. You wonder if a comforting cup of chamomile last night might have eased your rest. You tug at the rigid wool of your gown, wincing as the rough fabric catches at your knees. Dawn's weak light spills through the bamboo blinds, in motes of dust dancing lazily in the air. For a moment you recall the midwife's stern reminder, "Don't linger. The proof of the marriage debt must be shown." Now, in this hush, such words feel oddly poignant. At least no one can ask tonight, "How much do you still owe?" anymore. Maintaining that solemn mood, you remember the post-wedding morning wash ritual, an attempt to cleanse away shame and fear with cold water. Historians still debate whether it evolved from Christian baptismal rites or was a folk custom predating the church. Regardless of its origin, you'd gladly trade the chilly basin of this dawn for a warm bucket if given the chance. You step barefoot onto the cold, dew-kissed floorboards. Outside, the straw stacks glint with beads of moisture like scattered jewels. You think, perhaps this is the only moment of peace before the neighbours come back to inspect. But the distant creak of your mother-in-law's wooden shoes tells you her scrutiny isn't over. You slide back into the corner beside him, letting the early sun paint soft patches of gold on your face. He stirs, whispering, "Aren't you going to bathe?" "I think Mother's drawn warm water." Your frown is reflexive bathing in a sodden, mud-splashed gown hardly sounds inviting. You muster a half-hearted smile. Every "don't stumble on the church steps" warning now seems trivial when you're already navigating soggy boards. You grip his hand under the blanket, drawing a spark of courage at least you'll face whatever comes next together. Footsteps shuffle away, and silence returns. You turn toward him, a fragile hope flickering in your chest. All the weight of history, customs, and scholarly debate fades behind you in this quiet dawn. Here and now, you and he, two young souls, share the first sunrise of your medieval marriage. You inhale deeply, imagining the scent of chamomile tea replacing the damp straw and incense. There's no real magic in morning rituals, but at least you survived the wedding night unalone. And this dawn will forever remind you that, under every pressure, you still have each other's hands to hold.